My name is Saffron Everly, and this is how a single question asked with a smile shattered everything my father tried to keep buried. It happened at Christmas dinner. The table was dressed in gold, candles flickered, wine glasses clinked. Everyone was laughing, playing the part of a perfect Southern family. And then Grandpa Elliot turned to me, resting his hand on mine, and asked, "Is everything okay with the apartment I asked your dad to give you?" The fork slipped from my fingers. "Clara?" My mother paused, mid-sip. My little sister Willow looked at me like she had no idea what he was talking about. And Jasper? My father froze. His smile faded. His jaw clenched. I looked my grandfather in the eyes and said, "I'm living under the stairs in their house." Just that. One sentence. But it was enough to drag the silence across the room like a knife. You see, 5 years ago, Grandpa transferred $70,000 to my dad to buy me an apartment as a graduation gift. I never saw that apartment, never saw a lease, never even saw a key. Instead, I was told to be grateful for a roof over my head and given a cramped, windowless storage space under the staircase with no privacy, no dignity, and no name on any deed. Jasper used that money to invest in himself, not in me. And he lied about it for 5 whole years. But now, that lie had unraveled in front of every guest, every relative, every friend. And for the first time ever, he had no excuse. I'm sharing this because for years, I was made to feel like I didn't matter. But that night, I learned that truth doesn't need permission. It only needs to be said. Before I tell you everything that happened next, can you let me know you're here with me? Leave a quick hi in the comments, or tell me where you're from. I read every message, and sometimes just knowing someone is listening, it makes all the difference. And hey, if this story speaks to you, please consider subscribing. It helps this truth reach the people who need to hear it most. Thank you. Now let me show you how I took my life back. Christmas at Grandpa Elliot's house always looked like something out of a catalog. The chandelier above the table sparkled like it had been polished by angels. The 12-foot tree glowed with warm lights, and the scent of cinnamon and pine floated in the air. But beneath all that gloss was a cold, familiar distance, one that clung to the air tighter than the scent of the roast duck. I sat at the end of the long oak dining table, the leftover seat, as Willow used to call it. My dress, something I'd stitched together from old fabric scraps, was dull in comparison to the silk and sequins my mother and sister wore. They laughed with the cousins passed champagne and never once looked my way. I was 25, and somehow still the forgotten child at the table. When dessert was served, Grandpa Elliot, whose presence usually demanded silence, looked across the table with his usual gentle smile and asked, "Is everything okay with the apartment I asked your dad to get you?" Time didn't stop. It collapsed. I opened my mouth, not even knowing what would come out until it did. I'm living under the stairs in their house. The room stilled, like someone had pulled a plug on the evening. Forks paused midair, glasses clinked against marble plates. "Jasper!" My father froze as though I'd slapped him. Clara leaned forward, alarmed. "You said she moved into that apartment in Midtown, the one with the balcony? She wanted to live on her own." Jasper interrupted, voice tight. "She refused help. She didn't want to be controlled." I turned to him. "That's not true. I begged you. I asked for help finding a place when I graduated, and you said I didn't deserve it. You said I was lazy, that helping me would be a waste." Willow finally looked up from her phone. "Wait, you actually live under the stairs, like Harry Potter? Under the stairs?" She laughed, but no one joined her. Grandpa Elliot set his fork down slowly. "I transferred $70,000 to you the week she graduated. I told you buy her a place, help her get started." Jasper paled. I thought she didn't need it." His voice cracked, and for the first time in my life, it sounded small. I stood. The lump in my throat burned like fire. I'm done pretending this is a family. I'm done being the ghost at this table. I walked out before anyone could stop me. As I passed through the grand foyer, past the photos of family vacations I was never invited to, I realized something I hadn't meant to blow up the dinner. I hadn't wanted this. But my silence had become a weapon they used to pretend I was fine, that I was cared for. The chandelier still glittered behind me, but the cracks had begun. After the dinner, Grandpa didn't say much. He just looked at me, then asked softly, "Can I see where you live?" I hesitated, but nodded. It was time. We drove to my parents' house, well, the house I had technically grown up in. I led him inside and down the hallway past the photos of Willow in her prom dress, her graduation cap, her art awards. Nothing of me. Always nothing. Then I opened the door to the space under the stairs. It wasn't a room. It was a triangle of shadows. A worn mattress on the floor. A flickering yellow bulb dangling from the ceiling. Walls streaked with water stains and a draft that made everything smell like mold and regret. My clothes were folded inside an open suitcase, shoved into the corner like an afterthought. There was no door, no privacy. Just a thin curtain I'd thumbtacked up when Willow's friends came over. Elliot stepped inside and didn't speak for a full minute. Then he said very quietly, "How long?" "4 years," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Since college. Since the day I came home." He turned to me, eyes tight with something between pain and fury. "Why didn't you say anything I did?" I whispered, just not in ways anyone wanted to hear. I sat down on the mattress. I asked Dad if I could rent a small place something close to work. He said no, said I wasn't ready, that I'd come crawling back in weeks. Told me I should get a job flipping burgers so I could build character. I started to believe him. I thought maybe I really was the problem. Grandpa Elliot crouched slowly, knees cracking. "You're not. None of this is okay." Then he told me something that made my breath stop. "When you graduated, I gave Jasper $70,000. I told him to buy you a small apartment. Something modest, but safe. He told me you turned it down, that you said you didn't want handouts. That you had your own fancy apartment and didn't even thank me." My mouth dried. He said that. Elliot nodded. And I believed him, because I never imagined he'd lie. I stood up too fast, hitting my head on the low ceiling. He didn't just lie to you. He built a whole life out of it. He used that money for himself. "I'm going to find out exactly what he did with it," Elliot said. "Tonight." He pulled out his phone and stepped out to call Howard, our family attorney. His voice behind the curtain was low and clipped the voice of a man who had spent a lifetime keeping the peace and had just declared war. I sat there, watching the weak light swing slightly above me. This had been my cage, my purgatory. 4 years of silence. 4 years of thinking I wasn't enough. And now, someone had finally seen it. When Grandpa returned, he looked me in the eye and said, "We start first thing in the morning. No more hiding." I nodded. That night, for the first time in a long time, I slept without headphones in, without music to drown out the silence. Because silence finally wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was about to become very, very loud. The morning after the Christmas dinner that cracked our family's glossy surface wide open, Grandpa Elliot woke me just after 7. I hadn't slept much, but I got dressed without protest. The tone in his voice was gentle, but something behind it pulsed anger maybe, or a resolve. We drove in silence to a law office nestled in the historic district of Savannah, the same one Grandpa had trusted for decades. Inside, Howard, his attorney and longtime friend, greeted us without small talk. His tie was slightly loosened, and he looked like someone who'd stayed up all night, working through something heavy. "They've pulled the bank records," he said. "I had them expedited." We were led into a small conference room. The table gleamed with fresh polish. A woman in her 50s entered carrying a thick folder. Her glasses perched at the edge of her nose, and her expression was cool, but not unkind. She placed the file in front of us and opened to a page already marked. "This is the transaction, Mr. Hawthorne," she said, sliding it across the table. Grandpa adjusted his glasses. 70,000? He muttered. "Transferred 5 years ago right after Saffron's graduation." She nodded. "Yes." And 5 days later, the entire amount was moved into a private investment account under Mr. Jasper Sterling's name. "No property purchase?" I asked, voice barely audible. "None," she said. "There's no indication of any home loan title transfer or housing expense related to that amount, not then, not since." Howard leaned forward. "We confirmed this across both major banks Jasper has accounts with. There's no record of him ever putting that money toward a property." I stared at the page, tracing the numbers with my eyes. My name was nowhere. Not a single notation. Just a clean transfer of wealth that vanished into someone else's life. My father's life. Howard requested a full printed record. The woman disappeared briefly and returned with a stack of documents almost 2 inches thick. Grandpa didn't say a word as he took the folder from her hands. He turned one page, then another, his expression hardening with every line he read. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost all warmth. "He didn't just lie to me," he said. "He stole her future." I didn't correct him, because that's exactly what it was. For years, I'd convinced myself that maybe I hadn't worked hard enough, hadn't deserved more. I'd carried the weight of his disappointment, thinking it was my own shame to bear. But now, all of it lay exposed, cold, clinical, undeniable. Howard looked to Grandpa. "Do you want me to draft a formal complaint?" "Not yet," Grandpa said. "We confront him first, face to face." Then he turned to me. "Let me handle it, sweetheart. You don't have to carry this any further." But I shook my head. "No, I want to be there. I need to be." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. We left the bank, with the file clutched tightly in Grandpa's hand. I didn't say much during the drive. My thoughts spun in every direction. Rage, sadness, disbelief. But underneath it all, something new was taking root. It wasn't peace, not yet. But it was the beginning of strength. If my father had spent years telling me I couldn't stand on my own, then I was going to prove him wrong, starting with the truth. 2 days later, Grandpa and I pulled into the circular driveway of the house I used to call home. It looked the same: white columns, wraparound porch, ivy growing in perfect symmetry. But it felt like a stranger, a shell that had once pretended to hold love. Inside, the scent of gardenia and pine cleaner filled the foyer. The grandfather clock ticked steadily. Willow sat halfway down the stairs, legs crossed, phone in hand, oblivious to everything as usual. Clara appeared at the end of the hallway, her eyes wide with worry. Jasper opened the door, clearly not expecting visitors. Grandpa didn't wait. He walked straight past Jasper and into the living room, setting the file down on the coffee table like a final verdict. "You told me Saffron was living in the apartment I bought for her," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "You told me she was settled, grateful, independent." Jasper stood stiffly. "I was saving the money for her future. She doesn't appreciate anything. She just wants to tear this family apart." I stood beside the fireplace, very spot where I used to hang my stockings as a child. "No," I said quietly. "You told me I wasn't worth helping. You took what was meant for me and used it for yourself." Jasper looked at me for a long time, his face unreadable. Then he turned to Clara. "Tell them, Clara, you knew." She flinched. "Jasper, no. I didn't know at first, but when I found out, I stayed quiet. I was afraid we'd lose everything." I stepped back like she'd slapped me. "You chose silence," I said, "over me." Grandpa opened the file and spread the pages across the table. There it is, in black and white. You never bought the apartment. You never even tried. You buried that money into stocks and pretended you were a father. Jasper's jaw twitched, but he said nothing. He knew the evidence was airtight. I've already spoken with Howard, Grandpa said. You have 30 days to return every cent. If you don't, we go to court. And you'll be removed from every trust, every asset, every document that bears my name. Then he turned to me. From now on, all property connected to this family will be handled through her, through Saffron. Willow blinked, finally registering what was happening. Jasper still didn't speak. For the first time, the man who had always controlled the room looked powerless. Clara sat down on the couch, her shoulders shaking. I'm sorry. I should have said something. But I didn't know how to survive without this house, this life. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I walked down the hallway toward my old room, if it could even be called that. I packed a small bag, some folded clothes, few pieces of handmade jewelry, a book I'd loved since high school. That was all I had, all I'd been allowed. Grandpa waited by the door. You're not sleeping under those stairs again, he said firmly. You're coming with me. As I step out onto the porch, I turn back, one last time. Jasper stood in the entryway, arms folded, staring at the floor. He didn't look at me. He didn't stop me. He didn't say sorry. But he didn't need to. That silence, for once, was mine to own. I closed the door behind me, not with bitterness, but with clarity. It wasn't revenge I felt. It was something deeper. I was reclaiming what had been stolen piece by piece, my dignity, my agency, and the belief that I deserved better. And for the first time in my life, I truly believed it. 1 week after the confrontation at my parents' house, I was staying in the guest room at Grandpa Elliott's estate. The room was quiet, sunlit, filled with books and old maps. But even the soft ticking of the clock couldn't muffle the chaos building inside me. Every morning, I woke up with the same question pressing against my chest. How could they have stayed silent all these years? That afternoon, I was reorganizing my tools and bead trays, trying to set up a small workspace by the window. My phone buzzed with a message from Ava, a colleague at the artisan co-op where I used to sell my work. Hey, just checking in. Are you okay? There's a lot being said about you. My stomach twisted. I tapped through the notifications. In multiple online groups tied to the antique and craft community in Savannah, my name was being dragged through the mud. They said I'd fabricated the story, that I'd accused my own father of theft to steal an inheritance, that I was trying to shame my family for sympathy. I traced the origin back to several older collectors who had once worked closely with my father. Their comments echoed the same narrative. I didn't need a trail of receipts to know who fed them the lie. Jasper had started whispering into the ears of his contacts, spinning a story before I even had the chance to defend mine. The next day, I got an email from the committee of a local artisan fair I had applied to months ago. Due to recent controversies, it read, "We regret to inform you that your application has been declined." My fingers shook as I closed my laptop. I felt like I was sliding down a slope I couldn't stop, no matter how much truth I held in my hands. 2 days later, Clara called. I hesitated before answering. Part of me hopeful this was the conversation I had waited for a mother, realizing she had let her daughter suffer. But her voice on the other end was tight, brittle. You shouldn't have aired this in public, she said. You've turned this into a spectacle. I turned it into the truth, I replied, forcing myself to breathe steadily. You were destroying your father, and me, and yourself. I asked her the question I'd been afraid to voice. Did you know? There was a pause. Long enough to fill a room, I found out, after she said voice, barely above a whisper. But I couldn't go against him. You don't understand what that would have done to everything. I hung up. My hand trembled as I placed the phone down on the table. It wasn't rage that consumed me this time. It was something deeper, heavier. Disappointment had a way of settling in your bones. That night, Willow posted a long caption beneath a filtered photo of herself with Jasper and Clara smiling at a family fundraiser. Some people thrive on drama, it read. Not everyone wants to tear families apart for attention, but I guess some do. Though she didn't name me, she didn't have to. The comments below overflowed with support, with pity for her, with assumptions about me. The girl who had once braided my hair before school now painted me as a liar in front of thousands. I stared at the post until my vision blurred. Then, I closed the app and put my phone face down. The next morning, an email arrived from a longtime client, someone who had commissioned me for 4 seasons straight. Given the current circumstances, it said we'll be going in another direction this quarter. I hope you understand. My world felt like it was unraveling one thread at a time. My art, my identity, my voice. It was all being erased by a narrative I didn't write but couldn't escape. That evening, I sat on the couch in Grandpa's den, the file folder of bank documents still on the table like a permanent scar. I stared at it, not needing to open it. I knew every line, every number, every detail that had once promised me a future. Grandpa walked in quietly. He didn't speak. He didn't offer advice or assurance. He just sat beside me, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. And in that silence, I felt something shift. He believed me. That was still true. And maybe, just maybe, that truth was enough to keep going. Not just for me, but for every girl who had been told to be quiet, for every woman who had been erased by a more convenient story. 2 weeks later, Grandpa Elliot hosted another Christmas party. This one was different. The chandelier still gleamed. The wine still flowed. But beneath the sparkle, there was tension. It clung to every guest's greeting, every sideways glance. Everyone knew something had cracked. I wore a velvet green dress I made myself, with sleeves that wrapped like armor. It wasn't about looking elegant. It was about reclaiming the skin I had been forced to shed. Jasper and Clara were there standing near the piano, their smiles strained. Willow stayed close to the drink table, never looking in my direction. The guests included several of Grandpa's business partners and friends, people who had known my father as a trusted man for decades. When the dessert trays were passed, Grandpa raised his glass. I have something to address tonight, he said, not because the headlines want it, but because my conscience demands it. The room stilled. He motioned toward Jasper, read the letter. Jasper stiffened, but reached into his jacket pocket. His voice was flat mechanical. I, Jasper Sterling, acknowledge that I took funds given by Elliot Hawthorne intended for my daughter, Saffron Everly. These funds were used for purposes unrelated to her support. I apologize for my dishonesty and will repay the full amount within 6 months. He folded the letter with care, and for a moment, it seemed like he might sit down quietly. But then, his eyes found mine. She never wanted help, he said louder now. She wanted attention. She wanted to break us. She's always been ungrateful. The air went sharp. Conversation ceased. One man stood and set his wineglass down without a word before leaving the room. Others whispered. No one defended him. Grandpa's voice cut through the silence. You didn't just steal money, he said. You stole your daughter's dignity. And you lied to my face. Then to the room, he declared, as of today, Jasper Sterling is removed from any business involving the Hawthorne estate. The antique store will change hands. The legal process is already in motion to secure restitution. He turned to me. Saffron will be opening her own studio. I will personally fund the first year and assign her rights to manage part of the estate's artisan branch. Gasps followed, but I didn't flinch. Clara began to cry. She didn't bother hiding it. I knew, she said. I knew, and I did nothing. I didn't know how to stop him. I believed her, but I didn't feel relief. Only a quiet emptiness. I stood slowly. I don't need an apology. I don't need a reputation. My eyes met my father's, then Willow's. I just want what was taken from me, my right to exist without shame. And with that, I walked out. The velvet hem of my dress brushed the marble floor, and no one stopped me. No one dared. Outside, the air was crisp and quiet. Snow flurried under the porch light. I looked up at the winter sky above Savannah and felt no bitterness. I felt finished, not broken, not victorious, whole, and finally unafraid to take my own place in the world. 1 month after the second Christmas party, I moved into a small rental in the historic district of Savannah. Grandpa Elliot had helped me find the place a sunlit studio tucked above an old bakery. It wasn't fancy, but it had a skylight, a wide oak table perfect for my crafting tools, and most importantly, it was mine. Despite having been publicly vindicated, peace did not come. If anything, the backlash had simply taken a different shape. Jasper had hired a media consultant. They ran stories, posted threads, and whispered insinuations into the right ears that Grandpa and I had orchestrated a scheme to discredit him and seize control of the family estate. The implication lingered like a fog over everything I tried to rebuild. One morning, I opened an email from a prestigious craft fair in Charleston, the kind of event I dreamt of for years. They had declined my application, citing ongoing familial controversies. The message was polite, but the sting felt personal. Even my old colleagues from the artisan store I once worked at had grown distant. One of them, Becca, sent a short message. I don't know what to believe anymore. Saffron, there's just too much noise. And just like that, I went from being a quiet, dedicated artist to a walking headline, a symbol of scandal. No one cared about the truth when the lie had already taken root. Then, in the middle of a cold Tuesday, an email arrived that felt like a spark in the dark. Anais, we'd been classmates in college. She was fierce, brilliant, and always 10 steps ahead. She was now creative director for a national artisan collective. Saffron, her message began. I've been following your work for a while. I believe in you. We're inviting you to the National Craft Showcase in Atlanta. Full sponsorship, no politics, just your art. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't respond right away. Too many wounds made me doubt everything. I was afraid to say yes. Afraid I'd be rejected again, just in a more public setting. When I told Grandpa, he didn't try to convince me. He just handed me a cup of tea and said, "Don't let them finish your story for you." The following evening, Howard visited with a sealed envelope. Inside was the final court ruling. Jasper was ordered to repay the $70,000 he had taken, along with $20,000 in damages for emotional harm. Grandpa hadn't told me. He wanted me to focus on healing, not on retribution. And now the closure arrived quietly. No press, no spectacle. Just a paper and a signature that said the law is on your side. A few days later, a small package showed up at my door. No return address. Inside was a folded letter in my father's handwriting. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He wrote about his own youth, about a father who had pressured him to succeed or be invisible. He confessed to feeling left behind when Grandpa began placing his faith in me. His voice in the letter was tired, not defensive. You're stronger than I ever thought you'd be. I was wrong. If someday you want to talk, I'll be here. I folded the letter, tucked it in my desk drawer, and sat still for a long time. Not out of sorrow, but because a strange kind of release washed over me. The kind that comes when you realize the weight you've carried no longer belongs to you. I wrote Anais back. I said yes. I didn't say yes to reclaim anything or prove anyone wrong. I said yes because I was finally ready to walk forward on my own terms. March arrived, and with it, the National Craft Showcase in Atlanta. I stood behind my booth, surrounded by the quiet hum of conversation and the rich smell of pine wood displays. My space was modest, but every piece I displayed carried a story. My story. One necklace in particular caught attention. Under the stairs, a silver chain with jagged textures designed to resemble the confined, damp space I once called home. A bracelet called inheritance, braided coarse copper with polished emerald, symbolizing the balance between pain and strength. Customers stopped to listen, not just to the description of the materials, but to the meaning behind the metal. A journalist from a national crafts magazine asked to feature my work. A boutique jewelry brand from New York offered a collaboration. But what mattered most to me was when Grandpa arrived. He wore a tweed jacket and carried a small dark wooden box. "I figured it's time this came back into the light," he said, handing it to me. Inside was a velvet-lined jewelry case from the 1800s, filled with heirloom pieces that had belonged to my great-grandmother. "Our family buried too much," he said. "You were brave enough to dig it up." I didn't speak. I just hugged him. In that embrace, I felt something unshakable. A home not defined by walls or names, but by the people who choose to see you fully. Days later, I heard a knock at my apartment door. It was Clara. She wasn't dressed in pearls or perfume, just a cardigan and tired eyes. She handed me a box, a small one, worn at the edges. "I found these," she said. "Letters. You wrote them when you were little. I never opened them. I was too busy, or too afraid." Inside were folded drawings, scribbled notes. "I miss you, and please come to my recital, ESS." "I let fear speak for me," she said. "I thought silence would keep the peace, but it only kept us apart. I didn't tell her it was okay. It wasn't. But I stepped aside and let her into my home. That was a beginning. The next morning, I received a message from Willow. A paragraph, then another. The words were clumsy but honest. I was scared too. Scared I'd never measure up. And instead of standing beside you, I ran the other way. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope someday we can sit down like sisters again." I didn't reply right away, but I didn't delete the message either. Some doors opened slowly. The final day of the showcase brought a visitor I didn't expect, a woman from a foundation that supported women artisans. "We'd like to help you open your own studio," she said. "In Savannah." I hesitated. Savannah had been the setting of my hurt. But maybe it was time. It became the setting of my return, not as someone pleading to be seen, but as someone who no longer needed permission. Grandpa simply said, "Go back. But this time, walk in as the woman you've become." 3 months later, we opened the doors of the Saffron Everly studio. There was a ribbon cutting, some light applause, and Grandpa with a glass of sparkling cider in hand. "In life," he said in his speech, "pressure makes gems, and doubt makes warriors." Saffron was once a child they tried to hide away. Now she's the one leading us forward. I stood beneath the soft sunlight pouring through the windows, the shelves behind me, lined with the pieces I had shaped, etched, polished. There were no banners, no headlines, just the quiet pride of having built something that no one could take away. I was no longer the girl who slept beneath the stairs. I was the woman who walked out and never looked back. Sometimes the people who should protect us are the ones who hurt us the most. But healing begins the moment we choose truth over silence, dignity over comfort, and self-worth over approval. Life doesn't always give justice, but we can still choose to live with clarity, courage, and grace. If this story touched something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment and don't forget to follow and subscribe. Thank you for being here.